So hello everyone and welcome to our January EcoTalk presented by the Office of Campus Sustainability. Today we have speaker Michelle Serreyn on a presentation on Wild at Wayne, which is an overview of all different environmental initiatives going on and around our Wayne State campus. It should be really exciting. I first want to give a few updates on our different things that our office is working on currently. So you may have heard in previous conversations or through our Instagram account that we have our new compost program that's up and running, and it's been a great experience so far. We've made a lot of new relationships with different restaurants and different things around campus. So we're working with the Towers Cafe, we're working with the Starbucks in the Student Center, we're working with Panda Express, also in the Student Center. So we're making a lot of good work, and we're working with our partners at the farm, at an urban farm in Detroit. So we're making some good progress there. We are also, we launched our first, what is it called? Our first sustainability learning community last semester. That was a great success. We had a lot of students engaging with us in our office through that. We have also relaunched our webinar series on Wednesdays, or on every other Wednesday through our Instagram account, where the Green Warriors, which is kind of a subset of students through the Office of Campus Sustainability, give a fun short presentation on different things that are going on either around campus that you can do sustainably, or things that you can do as a student to, sustainably minded activities or crafts or things that you can do just in your free time or in your dorm. So definitely look out for those. Really exciting stuff that's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks with the office, and good stuff. It's a lot of good stuff. So without further ado, Michelle, she's going to start her presentation. We do ask that everyone mutes themselves on their during the Zoom. You're free to put in messages through the chat and questions. Michelle is also going to be pausing periodically for questions if you do want to unmute yourself and ask those, but there is going to be a long question and answer session at the end that everyone is free to participate in. So without further ado, Michelle, take it away.
Thank you, Camille. This is a great opportunity. Thank you for inviting me to do this. This is one of my passions. So I work for the Office for Teaching and Learning on campus, but I'm an ecologist at heart. So the first thing I want to do is start out here. I'm going to turn myself off as well. This, by the way, is Isabella. She was the former resident of our Peregrine Falcon nest here on campus. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a bit, but I just love this picture because it just says so many things. She was such a fierce little bird, always very protective of her space. Things have changed a little bit since she was here, but I'll talk more about that in just a little while. What I really want to focus on today is what's going on campus, kind of while we're not there, what the wildlife is like, what they're doing, and then some projects we have that have been ongoing for a while and some that are just starting. So this is twofold, just to kind of bring awareness to what's going on campus, and then to invite you to join us for some of these projects. So keep that in mind as we go along. If I can get this to work, we'll be all set. All right, so first, just a little bit about my background. This was my former house in Roseville. I had a half an acre and I wildscaped it so I could attract wildlife. So I had over 75 species of birds that I counted over time that stopped at my yard, either as a migratory stopover in the spring and fall, or were resident in my yard during the breeding season or during the winter. A lot of native plants. I really got into native plants here in the yard. Composting, didn't use a dryer the whole time I lived in this house. We had clotheslines that I used outdoors in the summer and indoors in the winter time. Collecting water in rain barrels. We had a bioswale before I knew what a bioswale was. So I got into this fairly early on and playing around with it a lot. But 4 years ago, I moved down here to campus, and now I have a backyard that belongs to my landlord. So campus has fortunately been gracious enough to let me kind of play around there. So I'm going to take you through some of what's been going on there. But just to give you a little bit about me, I had a pond. I raised monarch butterflies and a number of other species of butterfly and moth. So I've been playing around with this stuff for a while. I was also an environmental educator, both formally through the Huron-Clinton Metro Parks at several of the places, Kensington, Indian Springs, and what was Metro Beach, and what is now Lake St. Clair. I've also done a lot of talks for garden groups and nature conservancies all over the southeastern lower Michigan and a few in some other parts of the state. So this has definitely been what I've been doing with a good chunk of my life. While I've been here at Wayne, I found out about the President's Standing Committee on Environmental Initiatives and jumped on board. So most recently, I was involved with Green Street. So the first presentation in October with a few of my colleagues, Elena Past, Ashley Flintoff, and some folks from Planet Detroit. We gave a presentation, so the YouTube link is here. I gave Camille a PDF of the presentation, and all the links are embedded in there. So you're welcome to just kind of click through and see what we've been up to and catch up on some of the stuff that's been going on with that. But in our presentation, we were looking at campus and kind of reimagining how we can integrate it back with the environment a little more, given what we have here in this urban setting. We can do that. We were going to host it on campus, but of course with COVID, we couldn't. So we did the best we could virtually, and we're moving along. We're getting some things going on campus, thanks to the Office of Sustainability and Daryl's leadership. Elena Past, I know you're here, Elena, have been moving on things. So this is really picking up steam across campus. In my free time, I've been doing several things to monitor wildlife on campus. Casually in some instances, more scientifically in others. Oh, and I do have a blog that I've not been keeping up with because I'm kind of not a computer person. It's called Warrior Wildlife. So hopefully this spring I'll get back on board with that to keep you posted on what's going on. So some of the critters we've seen on and around campus, squirrels, of course, but you may not know some of these others. We do have a possum on campus. I've seen this individual fairly regularly during the day, which is a little unusual. We do have raccoons. I have not seen them on campus, but I have found evidence because yes, we have tracks. And as a naturalist, we also look at the droppings that the mammals leave behind. So we can tell who they are just by those two signs usually. We probably also have coyote. I haven't seen evidence on campus, but I have seen evidence at my house, which is right across the street from campus. A number of different bird species, ranging from small songbirds to geese who had a nest on top of the green roof at chemistry. And I had to camp out there one day until mom and dad were gone, get the babies into a box, take them down because it was too far for them to jump, and then wait for mom and dad to come back and wrangle them. Don't know where they went after that afternoon. We didn't see them again. City's not the best spot for waterfowl. The pond over at McGregor isn't really conducive to bird life. So don't know where they landed up, but we at least got the babies safely to the ground. We did see a turkey, wild turkey on campus one day underneath my office window at Science Hall. And we also have birds of prey on campus. This is a young Cooper's hawk, and they are bird predators. So they feast on some of the small songbirds that are here throughout the year. So we have a lot of different animals on campus that you don't think of as being in urban areas sometimes. And sometimes they're there just coincidentally, like this turkey. Sometimes they're more long-term residents, like the opossum, but they're definitely here. And one of the ones that I'm most excited about and I mean really excited about, are the two that nest in this balcony on the front of Old Main. So this is the side that's facing Cass Avenue. And in this balcony, there's some gravel, and it's a fairly high space, just perfect for this bird right here. I apologize, this is not the best picture, but this is off of the webcam that we now have located on the balcony. It's on the north side, and it looks down into the nest site. So this is a Peregrine Falcon. They're a small bird. The males are about 2 pounds, just over 2 pounds. The female is about 3 pounds. And they are typically cliff dwellers. So they would perch on a ledge on the side of a cliff. That's where they would have their nest. No formal nest materials, just whatever gravel and scree is there. They would lay their eggs there. They are also bird predators, but unlike the Cooper's hawk, which would be in the lower part, kind of just above the ground in the tree level, Peregrine falcons go way up into the sky. And when they spot potential prey, they fold their wings and plummet. They've been clocked at up to speeds over 200 miles an hour. So they are considered the fastest animal on planet Earth, and we have them right here at Wayne State. They were an endangered species for many years because of DDT and other pesticides in the environment getting into their food source. Because they're at the top of the food chain, those toxins were concentrated in their bodies, the more prey that they would eat that had those toxins in them. And so that damaged their reproductive abilities, just like it did for bald eagles and a lot of other predatory birds back in the 70s. Since those chemicals have now been regulated and there have been reintroduction programs for these birds, they have become much more successful. And we have many nesting pairs here in the city. There have been birds at the Whittier for quite a while, the GM building, the Fisher building. Wayne State has had a pair for at least 6 years. Originally, our pair were Isabella and Freedom. And Peregrine falcons, if they're injured and go to a rehabilitator, or if the nest site is being monitored, they are often banded. There are 2 sets of bands. One is a metal kind of bracelet through U.S. Fish and Wildlife that identifies each bird uniquely and individually by a number on the band. And these are the kinds of things they use whenever they're banding any kind of bird. So I work with someone at Lake St. Clair Metro Park who does bird banding during migratory season, spring and fall. And they've got different size bands for different birds, all the way from hummingbirds through great blue herons. And each of those birds that is caught then is banded and recorded and has an individual number so we can track them. The other band, though, on the Peregrine is more like the kind of wristband you get when you go to a concert. It's kind of that tough paper band. And it has 2 colors, usually black with either red, blue, or green, and often in one number in one of the band colors and a number or a letter in the other band color. And those are kind of large and bold. So if you have the right kind of binoculars or a spotting scope, you can see that designation and identify the bird. Normally when they're banded, the information is logged in a database. If anybody's interested in that, I'll be happy to send that to you, that link. And often they're given a name. So we knew at one time we had Freedom and Isabella. But last year in the spring, there was this huge kerfluffle through courtship season, which will be coming up pretty soon here at the beginning of February. I always think of it as right around Valentine's Day. Peregrines are very territorial. So our original pair were kind of defending their site, and another pair took over the site. And there was actually a third possible pair or an additional bird, we weren't sure because they fly by so fast, that was also kind of scoping out this site. So Isabella and Freedom got booted out, and now we have Regal and Aura. And what we know about them is Regal was hatched in Warren, Michigan at the Campbell Ewald building 2.5 years ago. It'll be 3 years this spring, so he's young. They sexually mature at 2 years, so last year he had his first set of children with Aura. Aura is from Toledo, Ohio. University of Toledo banded her, and she is quite a bit older. She was 8 last year, so a bit of a cougar, going for a younger guy there. But he turned out to be a super good provider his first time around. And she turned out to be a really good mom. There were 4 eggs. And as is typical with some birds of prey, because they're laid every 1 to 2 days apart, because the time it takes to develop in the female, often the last egg doesn't hatch. There's not enough nutrient in there, or it just doesn't develop fully. So we had 3 chicks last year. And because they are bird predators, they don't eat all pieces. So for monitoring these animals, we have, of course, the bands, so we can tell who's there if they are banded. We have the webcam, so we can watch them. And our previous pair used to leave all the parts that they didn't eat kind of scattered around the base of the front door of Old Main, around the clock tower, and also at the back of the Maccabees building. So I could kind of tell what they were feeding on. This happens to be the head of a flicker, which is a kind of woodpecker. But I would find woodcocks. One year they were really big into blue jays. Then the next summer it was crows. I've seen shorebirds, all kinds of stuff, especially during migratory season. So their chicks actually hatch right around the peak of migration, which means it's perfect time for them to just kind of do buffet dining on whatever birds are coming through this area. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. The current pair, however, are very tidy. I have not found much of anything around the base of Old Main, back of Maccabees. I don't know where they hang out and perch when they're not on the nest site. So it's become kind of a more intriguing puzzle to find out where they're hanging out and what they're eating. But I have seen them on and off, so I know they're still around, and hopefully they'll start showing up on the camera again soon. So sometimes our juveniles don't stay in the nest. The balcony does have kind of gaps on the side, and there's a little ridge that runs along the outer perimeter. So they start getting antsy, and then they get down to ground level. And since their wings aren't fully developed, and peregrines have very narrow wings to start with, they can't get back off the ground. So I get called in, and we have to go and catch them, which is not quite as easy as it sounds. Couple years ago, this should have been 2019, sorry about that, shouldn't be 2020. We had one land up at the farmer's market in the morning. So I kind of kept an eye on him for a while, and we were able to corral him. And Daryl, I think that was you and I, wasn't it? We got him into a box.
Yes.
I got him, yeah. So Daryl and I were playing round up the Peregrine Falcon. And even though it's a small bird, they're pretty ferocious and can take a chunk out of you pretty easily if they want to. And you want to be careful with them because they are birds and they do have delicate bones and body structure. So we got the peregrine into a box. I got him to the rehabilitator who's in Monroe, and he got banded. We had a naming contest, and Woodward won the naming contest. So he was released later that summer. His brother, however, who fell out of the nest a little earlier, and it was at night, did not make it. The police got called in. I wasn't available. They took him to a rehabilitator in, it was either Romeo or Richmond. Then he went to the rehabilitator in Monroe, had a lot of vet services, but he may have hit his head hard enough that he did not make it. But he's currently in the freezer in the Biological Sciences building because we're hoping to get him mounted so that we can put up a display about the Peregrine Falcons here at Wayne State. So those were our 2 2019 birds. And they also had an older sister who did not get banded because we can't get into the nest site to do that very well. And the DNR is cutting back on that program. So she made it. She was great. She hung out in the gutter for like 2 weeks, walking back and forth along the gutters in Old Main. And I didn't think she was going to take off there for a while, but she finally made it. Last year, we also had 3 successful juveniles with our new pair. I was watching the webcam one morning, and I noticed that one of the juveniles was hanging around on the outside of the balcony. So I thought, oh, I'll just walk up and look. I'm only 2 blocks away. So I left, rounded the corner of Old Main, and just as I came around the corner to the front side of the building, a bird tumbled right from the balcony down to the ground. Landed fairly lightly. Jessica Archer from class and Megan from the planetarium came by, and we got the bird into a plastic container. I got the bird to the rehabilitator in Monroe. And several weeks later, we went to the top of the parking structure across from State Hall and released Indy on July 2nd. Her full name, of course, is Independence. We think she is a small female. She's kind of in between size, so we're not quite sure. But she took off. Her family seemed to accept her back in. So hopefully she will survive. I have to mention, though, that the mortality rate for these young birds is about 60%. It's really tough for them to survive their first year. They get kicked out of the nest in late summer, early fall, just like every teenager, right? They get shoved out to make it on their own. It's like, bye kids, have a good time. We've taught you how to hunt, now go do it. But they're still fairly young. They don't have their own territory. They don't know the lay of the land. And if they get into another peregrine's territory, they could be chased out and potentially even killed. And winter is a big killer for these guys because they are so young and inexperienced. But if they make it through that first winter, they could live to be 20 years old. So once they get that good start, they're good to go. So as I mentioned, we do have a webcam. So this is kind of, you can see this is from a few years ago. So these are the chicks at about a month old. And you can see one of the eggs didn't hatch back then. So this is live. You can link to the webcam. It is on the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences Peregrine Falcon page. Nothing much to see right now, except snow. I put some new gravel in not too long ago. So I showed up on the webcam one morning. The gravel just helps for drainage and keeping things clean and away from the chicks' bodies. And this is kind of what the peregrines are used to. So it gives them that. I added new gravel to keep it above any water level that might collect in the balcony and to give them a fresh bed of gravel. So we'll see how they take to that this year. Fox 2 News came out a couple summers ago and did an interview with us. So you can see that interview about the peregrines just by clicking on this when you get the presentation. All right, I'm going to pause here for just a minute and ask if there are any questions about the peregrines. Feel free to come to the mic. I'm going to check the chat pretty quickly here.
Hey, Michelle, I had a question.
Sure.
I don't know if you'll know the answer, but you were mentioning all the chemicals that put the falcons out of, well, they put them in danger ultimately. Yeah. Do you know if Wayne State uses any of those materials, or if the city of Detroit does to affect the population that's existing at Old Main right now?
As far as I know, no. Most of the chemicals that they were aware of in the 70s when this was occurring and they were being researched were banned, like DDT. For the most part, a lot of these chemicals were used on agricultural fields as pesticides. And when rain would hit the fields, it would wash that pesticide into the water system. So any animals drinking that water were affected, but especially fish and fish eaters like bald eagles were very strongly affected. Gotcha. Ospreys were very strongly affected. In the case of peregrines, they don't eat fish, but they might sometimes eat fish, like some ducks. As small a bird as they are, they do take out ducks on occasion, which are actually larger than they are. So if that was what their typical food source was, that would concentrate those chemicals in their bodies and again affect their reproduction. But gotcha. As of right now, we're in pretty good shape. So yeah, we have our own set of falcons here on Old Main. So I've got the link, and I can drop the link in the chat later if you'd like, so you can check out the webcam. We just went up there and cleaned it off, so everything should be good to go.
Just the link to the webcam in the chat, so everyone should be
okay.
I also had a question. So
sure.
You were saying that there are different groups of falcons that were trying to get the same spot.
Yep.
Is it difficult in an urban setting for, you know, birds like these to be able to, you know, live to their full potential without, you know, the high trees or the high cliffs and stuff, or, you know, with the building infrastructure that the older building infrastructure that Detroit does have, is it a little bit easier for them?
It's actually a pretty good site. The nice thing is we do have some of these areas like this balcony that are just ideal nest sites for them. They are not obviously naturally city dwellers. In Michigan, typically you'd find them up around pictured rocks because that's about the only cliffs that we have in Michigan, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, they're a Western bird, but they were reintroduced into the state and have been thriving both in the Upper Peninsula area and in cities, not just Detroit. They're also in Ann Arbor. I think there's some in Grand Rapids. I know there's some in Jackson, Michigan, because that's where Freedom came from. He was hatched out of Jackson, Michigan. So they're doing quite well. And in fact, when the rehabber was here and released Woodward 2 years ago, he looked around and he went, oh wait, there's the Fisher building. I can see that from here. There's the GM building. I can see that from here. And there's a few other buildings that I know where there are falcons at. So the falcons here have a much smaller territory than they would typically have. And the biggest problem we have in this area are the overlaps of their territory and the competition for food. If you've noticed, there aren't too many pigeons around right now. That's one of their primary food sources. I don't typically find pigeon heads, but I do find pigeon legs. And they're pretty distinctive because they're pink, typically. So, and some of them are banded, so they were people's pigeons, potentially. But yeah, so competition is probably with other falcons in the area for food is probably the biggest thing. Can we set up other ideal areas throughout our campus or city? You have to be pretty high up. Falcons have a very narrow wing, and so they typically can't get off of the ground or get enough lift from a low site. The balcony on Old Main's about as low as they go. So they have to kind of jump off of something and get the wind under their wings in order to kind of get moving. That's why when the young ones get to the ground, not only are their wings and flight muscles not developed, they just wouldn't be able to get themselves off the ground anyway very well. So we could set up other areas. The area at Campbell Ewald is actually a built space for Peregrine Falcons, and they have a webcam also, a very nice webcam, almost right into the nest site. So we do have things called hacking towers that we use for some of these birds, or hacking boxes that allow us to have access to the birds through banding and monitoring, but also provide a good space for them to live in. However, just like our balcony here, they see a spot that looks good to them and they just say, yeah, that's the spot. I'm gonna nest there. We also have other birds that have been caught nesting in the city on our taller buildings. We have a pair of red-tailed hawks that I believe was on the Guardian building or one of the other ones down in that area. Not ideal for red-tailed hawks, but animals are becoming much more adapted to city conditions and urban areas. So they're making it work. But if you do want to help wildlife, there are other ways to do it because peregrine falcons need birds to eat. And so I'll talk about some of that, and that's how we can help the falcons, by bringing more birds into the area that they could potentially use as a food source. All right, any other questions on these guys? All right, I'm gonna kind of move along here and talk about monitoring other birds. So I work with Detroit Audubon as a volunteer for a program called Safe Passage Great Lakes. We will be recruiting volunteers probably at the beginning of March for this program. And this is to look at our bird populations during migratory season in the spring and fall and monitor the effect that our buildings have on these birds. As you may know, birds run into buildings because They are confused by the lighting in cities and because of windows, especially really reflective windows. And so many birds during that time of the year, especially since many of them migrate at night, run into buildings and either are stunned, concussed, or killed. And this is a very, what's the word I want? Sorry about that. High priority for Audubon to look at this because there are ways we can mitigate this. And as it says here, 600 million to 1 billion birds die every year just from hitting buildings. And if we turn lights off and treat the windows and arrange things so that's less likely to happen, we could save a lot of birds. And these are birds ranging anywhere from game birds like woodcocks down to our small songbirds like warblers. And some of these are species of concern. So we're really looking at trying to mitigate the effect our buildings have on these birds. So this is the passage between the law school and the law library. So if you walk at it from the west, this is what you see. So imagine being a bird. You look at this and you think, oh, I can just, fly right through that, right? There's a tree on the other side. They don't understand glass and windows. So they smack right into it. And then I find the birds. If they don't make it, they're on the ground below the windows. So with this program, I walk a route every morning that I can, trying to find out where the birds are hitting, what species they are, what condition they're in. I actually rescued a woodcock from the Mort Rec Center last fall. It was stunned. So I caught it, put it in a box, brought it home, put it in my linen closet because I have cats and they are a nocturnal bird. And then early the next morning, while it was still dark, it was recovered and I was able to release it from my backyard. But this is a pretty tragic event, obviously. And with this program, we actually data into this global bird collision mapper. So we can pinpoint which areas on campus and the surrounding community are the most likely spots where birds will hit, and then start to think about what we can do in those sites to reduce that. So you can see our two hot spots here are the Mort Recreation Center. And the really weird thing is it's not the south side of the building that faces the mall. It's the other sides of the building, which is kind of odd, and the law school. On the law school, it's both sides of that passage and both the entry atriums on the north and south side of the building here. A couple other areas, the FAB with that big reflective glass curve in the front and the atrium on the side, that's our other hot spot. So we're thinking about different ways that we can work around this with window treatments. The simpler the solution, the better. And we're kind of putting those ideas forward to see if we can kind of fix the issue here. Oh, and I should mention that if you are a bird flying over this area, Wayne State is a very attractive place to settle down and stop quickly for the evening. When I was doing nature programs, I used to tell school-age children that places like this are McDonald's for birds. They see a green space, it looks familiar, it looks like it might have food. They'll settle down there to rest for the day, feed, and then be on their way the next morning, or the next evening rather. So we do get a lot of migratory birds through here, especially since we're relatively close to the Detroit River, and two major flyways from Canada in the fall down along the Atlantic or down along the Mississippi. And those two flyways cross right over this area as the birds head south in the winter and then north again in the spring. So we get a lot of migratory birds here, more species than you can imagine. And unfortunately, for the most part, we know they're passing through when we find the bodies of the ones that have hit. But it is a good way of tracking the birds that are coming through at different times of the year.
So I have a question.
Sure.
What do you mean when you say like window treatments for birds?
So there are several things that we can do. Number one, turning off the lights inside the building overnight. That's a biggie. Secondly, we can reduce the reflectivity or break up the pattern. One of the simplest things that they have found that you can do is put a pattern of dots in the windows. These are dots that are made so they're not very visible to human beings, but birds can see into the ultraviolet. And so they're more visible for birds. And the dots are about 2 inches apart. That's the best pattern. You can also get a pattern that's 4 inches apart. That's not quite as effective. And so you put this treatment on the outside of the window. It just sticks onto the window. And you have this little pattern of dots then that the birds can see. And that breaks up the reflection enough to kind of indicate to them that is not a tree that they're looking at. It's looks like a tree, but it's not, because it's got all these little dots on it. So it's enough to deter them from flying into the windows as though they were going to what they see there or through to the other side. The Detroit Zoo has been implementing this quite a bit. The new International Wildlife Refuge is doing this as well. So folks are starting to get on board with how to do this. We're going to start monitoring our iBio building also, if you've been up in that area. The glass is across the front and the woodward side of the building, but it's got this kind of white birch tree pattern on it. And we're wondering if that is effective as a deterrent as well. We have had a few birds hit there, but we haven't been monitoring that building very much. Other things that they have found that you can do is just decorate areas with tempera paint. And one of our spots that we were thinking about doing that are the 2nd and 3rd floor passageways between Science Hall, Life Science, and Chemistry, because we do get bird strikes there as well. So just painting on the windows to break it up. The spot we'd like to work on the most is the passage between the law school and the law library, because it's not very visible to the public, so we can kind of monkey around with that maybe and see what the effects are without hopefully offending anyone's sensibilities. And it's also very accessible to get at the windows and put something on them. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do. All right, any other questions about migratory birds and monitoring window strikes with Detroit Audubon? Again, we'll be looking for volunteers at the beginning of March. So if you're interested in that program, you can let me know. On the staff, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, definitely send more information my way on the
Okay.
yeah, onto our Instagram.
All right. And last but not least, I'm part of the Detroit Biodiversity Network. I'm their staff advisor. I was approached by some students who are working with Seed Wayne about using the greenhouses on top of Science Hall for starting vegetable plants for the Warrior Gardens. And I was like, yeah, sure, this is great. Let's do this. And then I introduced them to native plants. And native plants are those that are indigenous to an area. In the case of North America, we think about stuff that was here prior to European settlement, as far as we know. And so we have species that have been here historically since the glaciers receded, that have formed coevolutionary communities with other plants and insects and microorganisms and birds and other animals. So they're adapted to our climate, our soils, and the organisms that need them and interact with them. So pollinators, nectar feeders, insects that use the plants as hosts for their larvae, like butterflies and moths. Their caterpillars feed on certain plants. Animals that eat those plants, seed dispersal. There's this complex web of relationships among these organisms. And so using native plants has a lot of benefits for the ecosystem, but also for us in reducing our need for things like pesticides and fertilizers, because they are adapted to the areas and you don't have to do anything special to get them to grow there. They help us with mitigating stormwater. So there's a lot of benefits to using native plants. So we started growing them up in the greenhouse, and the students kind of moved in that direction. We had a nursery going up there for a while. And then COVID hit, so we've had to back off on that a little, but we're starting to ramp things up again this year. So we're always going to be looking for help doing that. We have a bunch of projects. So I mentioned that complex among the organisms here, that's biodiversity. And that's a measure of how many different organisms are in a particular area and their interactions with one another. And the more organisms you have and those robust interactions, the stronger that web is, so that if something happens to one of the species or something happens to the area, the ecosystem can bounce back with more resiliency if you have that strong web established. So this was an article that Planet Detroit put out, not only about the things that we're doing here on campus, but things that are going on throughout the city. This, by the way, is our bioswale at lot 12 at the north end of campus, which I'll talk about in just a bit. And you can link to the article in the PDF just by clicking on the picture here. So like I said, we're trying to promote biodiversity here on campus, and we're doing that through our native plants, but there have been quite a few things here that you may not have noticed already. We have a lot of different pollinator species, depending on the size of the plant, the color of the flower, and the nectar and pollen that are available. There are many, many pollinators: bees, wasps, beetles, ants, flies, and not just insects either. So pollinators are more than just honeybees and butterflies. We also have larval host plants, which are the things that the caterpillars eat, and caterpillars are very specific in their food sources, most of them. Obviously, this is milkweed because this is a monarch caterpillar, and we have had lots of monarchs on campus. I have been involved in tagging monarchs in the fall in the past. Hopefully, we'll have enough of a population here on campus to start doing that again. I saw Katie did on, let's see, this was the Student Center this past fall. It was just hanging out there on the wall. And this praying mantis was at the UGL, and this cicada was on a bench out on the mall. So they're around, you just kind of have to know what you're looking for. So we have a pretty good insect diversity established, and that's good because insects are what songbirds primarily eat. They don't eat seed unless they're sparrows or finches or grosbeaks. They don't eat worms, which is what most young children tell me. Yeah, birds eat worms. No, for the most part, they don't eat worms. Worms are in the ground. So maybe robins, thrushes, woodcocks, but that's about it. For the most part, they eat insects. And caterpillars are what they feed their babies. 90% of a baby songbird's diet is caterpillars. They're highly nutritious. They even make good eating for people. If you ever want to learn about that, I'll be happy to teach you how to eat bugs. It's another thing I do, not as a habit, but I teach people about. So promoting insect life on campus is the first step to building a more robust ecosystem. And it's actually the second step because the first step is planting the plants that they need. So here we can see we've got a lacewing up here on the swamp milkweed. That's a natural predator species. So not only are we putting in things that help feed birds, we're also encouraging putting in those predator species that help balance those populations. And here in Warrior Garden, we had things like, this was Queen Anne's lace. You can also use Golden Alexander's, and this is a black swallowtail caterpillar. And it's one of its beginning stages. This is what they look like later on with these little orange horns here. When you disturb them, they stick out these little orange horns that smell really bad. Even for a small caterpillar, it's a pretty potent odor. So they have defense mechanisms that are kind of interesting. But we've obviously been able to promote some of these species here on campus with what we've been planting. So check out the DBM site. You can kind of see the projects that we've been involved in. And we are heading toward the future. We have had students come and help us begin seeds in the past. Of course, we can't have folks on campus right now, but we have been able to get a couple of us up there in the greenhouse beginning things already this winter. We started some things last week. So we're working toward that. And part of that is for some projects we have ongoing on campus. We partnered with Friends of the Rouge and the Sierra Club a few years ago to put in our first bioswale in lot 12 at the north end of campus. That project is now, Daryl, how old is that project? It'll be 4 this summer. Yes, I think it's going to be 4 this summer. It's been a while.
Yeah, 4 years this year.
4 years this year. Great. Yeah. So, yeah, you can see Daryl there, bunch of students. So that project has flourished and led to the installation of a second bioswale across the street. This is what it looked like this summer at the peak of the summer. And this requires basically no care from us. It takes the rainwater off of the parking lot there, filters it through the soil to help it get kind of cleaned up before it goes into the groundwater, and also to prevent it from going into storm drains. So the whole purpose of this, from our perspective as people, is to keep the water from going into the storm drains with all of the pollutants that it may carry: sediment, oil, salt, chemicals from cars, you name it. And the secondary purpose then is to provide habitat for wildlife. And that's the part I like the best. I have a picture of a ringneck pheasant here because I was messing around in here taking out non-desirable plants, because those do invade these spaces. And I flushed a pheasant out of the bioswale. Scared the heck out of me, but it was very exciting to see that the animals are using this space. So not only the insects and the smaller birds, but larger wildlife as well. Across the street at iBio, the year after, we were commissioned to install a second bioswale along the front side of iBio there, adjacent to the Woodward. So this would be Woodward here, and this is Burroughs. There we go. So that bioswale takes in the whole area that was sod along the parking lot here. So the water filters off the parking lot and off of the sidewalk into this area. And you can see the different species that we have in there. And this year we actually got some accolades from the folks that work in the building. They weren't so sure about this project at first because I thought it'd be kind of weedy, and it was like, nope, it's gonna be good, really. And it's doing quite well. Oops. Oh, so that looked like this summer. So it's getting there. It takes about 3 years for these projects to really establish themselves well and get going. So there's not no maintenance, there's some maintenance. And we've been filling in bare spots, pulling out weeds, and making sure everything's working just fine. So here's kind of a map of some of the projects that we have in and around campus. And that's live on the DBN website, so you can take a look at that. And these are some of the other gardens that are on that map. We've started a research project in the corners of Lot 12 with Glenn Hood from biology to monitor milkweed and pollinators that are using milkweed plants of different species at different times of the year. We have gardens at the Woodward and Warren Pocket Park across from the Welcome Center that are native plants, and that project is a couple years old now and doing quite well. Warrior Garden, of course, used to be located behind St. Andrews, and then when they put in the apartments and had to use that as a construction site, it got moved to behind the UGL. We need to kind of revamp this site, and we're looking at maybe moving it to a different area on campus, but that's a student project. We've had vegetables in there, flowers for making cut flowers for vases. We would sell herbs and cut flowers at the farmer's market. So that is a student-run project. We've had high school students there in the summer times. I've taken over a few areas on campus that are kind of really not great plant growing areas and definitely not good for sod, and installed native plants that are adapted to the really harsh conditions in some of these areas. This is right behind the Biological Sciences building. It's sand and gravel, hot asphalt drive on one side, heat reflective building on the other side. And as you can see here, the plants are doing great. And this summer I got to see some goldfinches eating the seeds from the flowers there. So that was exciting. And we've got some new projects on the horizon. So I'm working with a team of students who got an EPA grant to put in rain gardens at Lindsell House. So we've got the area kind of flagged out now where the gardens will hopefully go in. They're going to be monitoring groundwater flow in this area to see if our rain garden installations can remove some contaminants from the soil We're also working with a couple community groups at the east side of Detroit on projects in their areas as well. The new STEM Innovation has a big green space between it and biological sciences that hopefully we will turn into a bioswale at some point. But in the meantime, there is a planter in front of the STEM building facing the life science building that we're looking at using for student research projects, summer camp projects. We're not sure yet. We're meeting with a bunch of folks on campus trying to figure out how we're going to use that space most productively and sustainably. We put in a few proposals through Bold Moves for more green infrastructure installations and maybe some cultural gardens on campus. So I will definitely put things out there if any of those land up going through and hopefully getting funded. And that's what's going on campus. So if you want to get involved in any of these things, find out, what you're really interested in, learn about those things, get in touch with me. I can put you in touch with background resources and information, different groups and clubs, different websites. Join one of the organizations here on campus or a broader organization like Sierra Club, Friends of the Rouge. We'll have some events here on campus, hopefully in the near future, but obviously we have things like this that can kind of get you up to speed on what's going on. And yeah, so help us out here getting campus more sustainable on the nature end of things. And then not only can we boast about being a more sustainable site, but we can also enjoy the wildlife and promote their success as well. All right, that was a really fast overview of what's going on campus here. So I will open up for questions.
Yeah, I was, so I am a painter, sculptor, video maker, and I reuse trash in my art. That's what I do. I make stuff out of garbage.
And you come to the OTL a lot.
Huh?
I get to see you at the OTL too.
Yes.
So I was really excited to see you here today. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for doing this. I was like really, really excited when I saw this. And I missed out on Green Street because I was trying to learn how to teach during that time period, and I was very overwhelmed. So I was really excited to start seeing stuff popping up about our sustainability goals. One of the problems I'm having, so I have space here and my landlord has told me that we can do whatever we want on the land. So we've been trying to kind of rehab the soil in a very amateur sort of way, just coffee ground, some natural compost area, even though we don't have a compost bin, and letting things grow that kind of show up. There's a thistle that just showed up on its own under our black walnut tree and some other things. And we keep bird seed out there. So we've gotten just this past summer and winter, we've got anecdotally at least twice as many birds coming into our yard than what we had before.
You
and
can definitely
a lot
push that.
of happy squirrels.
Yeah, with a walnut tree, you bet.
Right. So one of the things that me and my fellow housemates are interested in doing is combining this desire to allow there to be biodiversity in our yard and on this land, and also our artistic inclinations. So it's looking up native plants that can be used for dyes or other types of things. And I've been trying to get Michigan bloodroot for 4 years, and it's impossible to find anywhere.
Yes.
And I've learned that even when I do Google searches and it's Michigan native plant seeds, you get them and they're not really.
No.
That's not what's going on, Nope, so
no.
I
growing
really,
bloodroot from seed is almost impossible.
Right. You have to get a root, right?
Yes. A couple things here I can tell you. Number one, it's almost impossible to grow from seed because the seed is dispersed by ants. A lot of woodland wildflower seeds here in Michigan have a very strong bond with ants. They have something on their seeds called an elaiosome, which is an attractive food source for ants. So they go grab the seed and take it back to their colony in the earth, of course. They eat the elaiosome and leave the seed. So the seed is in this perfect environment for germinating inside the ant mound. It's got the right moisture, humidity, temperature, and everything else. We can't duplicate that.
What?
And it happens right after the seeds are dispersed. So usually by the time we collect the seeds, it's too late. They've dried up, they're no good anymore. And bloodroot actually, when it ripens, pops. And so unless you get those seeds immediately, you're not going to get them. We actually have bloodroot on campus in several places, by the way. I have some here in my backyard, and I've got some in front of the Biological Sciences building. And I was able to obtain it through the Cranbrook Wildflower Sale, which used to happen every spring, the Tuesday and Wednesday after Mother's Day. And they have those plants there because they have a group that has permission and licensing to remove plants that are threatened by development. So they will find out where there are areas of native wildflowers, typically the woodland ones, but now they're actually moving into more wetland species and shrubs and trees as well. And they get permission from the developer to go onto the land and remove plants. And so we go out there with our buckets and our shovels and our sleds and dig up as many things as we can and get them off the land as fast as we can. Pot them up back at Cranbrook and then let them sit in the pots for about a year and then sell them the next spring.
Oh.
That's one of the few ways you can get them. The other thing is, I don't know if Bill has any, but there's a nursery in Lansing area, actually in Mason, called Wild Type. And he's been getting into more woodland plants, but they're difficult to do. So most of it is, yes, from root cuttings for the woodland plants. But with bloodroot, to use it as a dye, you would have to basically kill the plant or take a chunk of the root to do it. Yeah, that's where the dye is.
Our goal would be to have enough so we only
Yeah.
take some of it and we keep keep it growing in the area.
Yeah.
I just can't believe how many yards there are in the world. It's like all this grass. You could be doing, like the real stuff, you know?
Yes.
It's like, what are we doing?
Oh, there is a big movement right now, spurred by Doug Tallamy, who's an entomologist from New Jersey. And his idea is that we turn these backyards into small habitats. And it doesn't matter, you could have an apartment with a balcony and you can still have a little chunk of habitat. So if we focus on native plants, which have these interactions and relationships with the wildlife, that helps promote the wildlife and builds that robust ecosystem. So if each of our little postage stamp backyards had this little bit of habitat, or like my half acre in Roseville, where I saw 75 different bird species over the course of my time there. I mean, I had woodcocks in my backyard in Roseville. Talk about suburbia. I had freeways on two sides of me and major roads on the two other sides. And they would see my little backyard and drop down and spend some time there. So I had scarlet tanager, I had warblers. It was beautiful.
I let this thistle grow, which turned out to be a real big pain for my long-haired chihuahua. But I didn't want to kill it because it was so happy. And then all these yellow birds started coming into the backyard that I had never seen before. They were super bright.
That's male goldfinches.
They loved the thistle. They were like all over the thistle all the time. And it made me very happy.
And they use the fluff for their nests. They are the latest nesting bird in Michigan. They don't nest until thistle produces seeds because they use the thistle down for their nests. They are here year round, but the males lose their bright yellow plumage in the winter and go to a dull olive green, which is the same color as the females. So I have a thistle feeder in my backyard here, 1 block off of campus. And I have goldfinches at the thistle feeder. One thing about the thistle, though, is the one that you have in your yard is probably a non-native species. So if at all possible, I would replace it with a native because the non-native species can become very aggressive and push out natives. You also have black walnut, which is problematic because they put out a chemical from their roots that is toxic to most other plants. Yeah. But because the black walnut is a native Michigan tree, we have native Michigan plants adapted to being with black walnuts.
And that's what we really want, are like, we want to just have plants that are some kind of, I don't want to say supposed to be here, because obviously it's not the plant's fault that they're here, you know, but we wanted to have native plants as much as possible in our in our yard behind the, like over by the walnut tree. We'd like to have that
Right.
whole section of the yard just be like natural place. Because we
we
love
can.
having so many birds, and I know that that's why we have so many more birds. It's just
Yep.
because we let that stuff grow.
Yep. Well, we can have that conversation. So I'm going to drop my email into the chat here,
Thank you.
and everyone is welcome to contact me with questions. Hopefully we'll have plants for sale again at some point. I usually have enough that I dig up from around the area that I can give a lot of them away. Green roofs, I'm seeing a lot about that in the chat here. That would be great. Roofs are a little harder to grow things on because you have to have the infrastructure for the roof to be able to support soil and wet plants. So it has to be pretty sturdy to be able to do that, and you have to have access to be able to maintain it. We have 2 green roofs at the chemistry building, which we don't have great access to for maintenance purposes. So, but yeah, rooftop gardens, if we could do that, that would be super. A lot of places are starting to do more of that, especially in Europe. Black swallowtail caterpillars, Elena, yes, they eat dill, fennel, Queen Anne's lace, everything in the carrot family. So you will definitely see some black swallowtail caterpillars if you have some of those plants and herbs in your yard.
That's sort of, can I ask a question about that, Michelle?
Sure.
So how do you think about balance in the ecosystems that you take care of? I mean, the bioswale is one thing, but if you're also cultivating food,
yep,
and you have stuff that you are excited about, like caterpillars, but they're eating all of your food. I'm just, it's the interesting question of what balance looks like and how you as a naturalist sort of imagine you curate it.
That's a great question. I grow vegetables here too. And so since I tend to like things in the cabbage family, I get cabbage butterfly caterpillars in my stuff. The cabbage white, the one we see the most, is not native, so I don't feel really bad when the birds come and eat them. One thing I did find when I was in Roseville, my garden was surrounded by, it was in the middle of the yard, and it was surrounded by all the native scaping that I had. And I never had a problem with insect pests in that garden because the birds pretty much took care of it for me, and the predatory insects. So I would find ladybugs. In fact, one of my fun stories about that was I had American plum trees growing in my backyard, so native plum trees, and they were great tasting little plums. And one year they got infested with this bright turquoise aphid. And once aphids get started, aphids breed without sexual reproduction, so they can just pump out little aphids like nobody's business. And these trees were totally infested. In fact, they would drop off
Yeah.
Michelle,
did
you lost your audio. Oh. Well, that's a bummer. But well, thank you for everybody who came and who attended. I think this was a very great eco talk, and I definitely learned a lot about all the different things that we can do as a campus to promote a sustainable environment, especially in an urban setting. It's I would imagine it's very difficult to kind of keep up with the heat and the concrete and different issues that a lot of urban universities experience. So thank you everyone for joining, and keep a lookout on our Instagram for updates of different things that will be happening. And if you are not on our email distribution list and would like to be, definitely drop your email in the chat and I can add you to it.
I don't know if I'm on the list or not, but I dropped my email just in case. I also wanted to throw out there that I don't know. I hate to being a person. I'm an idea person, right? So I always have a lot of ideas. So I'm coming with like an open mind, but I did want to share this idea because I don't know if this would ever be helpful. Artists often have a really hard time getting, like, eco artists have a hard time when they're in school because they're going to school for art or they're going to school for ecological reasons, and they're not able to do like both things, right? So if you're studying to get a fine art degree, you can't usually also handle studying to get, you know, a degree in ecological sciences. So I know some artists who are branching into using trash materials and trying to have like a large focus on the environment in their work. And so I was wondering if when there's like a sustainable event going on, or if there's, I don't know if there's philanthropy things that people do to like raise money, but like a call for like environmentally motivated art from students might be like somehow usable or helpful in like funding some of these projects. I don't know, that's just like something that occurred to me because I'm now a grad student and I have undergrad students who are contacting me and wanting to talk to me about using these kind of materials in my work and what that means. And I am realizing that like, I know what it means for art, but I don't know what it means for Detroit. You know, I don't know what it means for the actual land. So that's, you know, I realize that there's a gap there and I don't want there to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I'm back. Sorry. I lost my internet connection.
No worries. It happens.
To answer that, I can put forward a couple ideas. We had former grad have exhibited at the Michigan Science Center when they had a huge kind of environmental art installation there. So I don't know if you know Maris Polanco, but I can always.
Yeah.
And she had a jellyfish made out of pus that has since migrated to several others, including Washington, D.C. So yeah, the interest in kind of the connection between art and environment and sustainability is becoming a really big thing.
Yeah.
So I think we can probably out, and I know the Charles H. Wright African American History Museum is really pushing their sustainability initiatives big time. So they might be interested in hosting something also that we could work with them on. And of course here in our art museums and stuff. Ooh, and outdoor exhibits too. I'd love to have something outside.
It would be so nice.
That'd be very cool.
If we could pull off like a summer eco art fair outside, maybe not this summer, but like 2022. I'm making all my plans for 2022. It keeps me peppy. Summer 2022 is gonna rock. So if we could do it that summer, that would be, I think, maybe doable. Maybe, I don't know how much, like, I don't know how much time getting something actually approved through Wayne State usually takes. I helped, I was on the team that did the mural behind the press building last year. And that project moved really fast because we had like a corporate sponsorship for it. But I felt like it moved really slow. Everybody else was like, this is moving really fast. And I was like, this takes forever. So I don't know, like, if we were to start to get something going now, would it be like a year or 2 years or 3 years? How, like?
Well, I know that speaking from, you know, the outreach that we get from the Office of Campus Sustainability's Instagram and our distribution list, we have a lot of different people. We work with different student organizations. For instance, we have like a Green Beans student organization, which we work with a lot of different sustainably minded orgs on putting on activities or for advertising different events or different things like that. And we do have a lot of reach in being able to advertise to different people like, hey, if you are, you know, if you find yourself to be an eco warrior and you want to be able to display some art, you know, contact us and we can put you in, you know, in contact with different places or different things that we're working on. For the timeline, I'm not really sure. It kind of depends on who we're working with, but that's it's definitely a great idea. And I think that's definitely something important that we should be able to work towards.
To have something displayed on campus, you want to start as early as possible. Just as an example, there were a couple of years ago, there was the Christmas lights that were put up on campus. That conversation started in early November, and it probably should have started in like July, August. So just the earlier, a year out is not unreasonable. Just because you've got the space committee, then you've got different groups that have to get involved. You got to get buy-in, like the campus fire marshal. There's just a lot of people that you kind of have to go through to get something on campus. And so the earlier you start, the better. So summer 2022, I think now is a perfect time to start talking about that.
Jenny, hi, my name's Leah. I work with to introduce myself. I'm ecstatic with your enthusiasm because it's really cool to see you representing I think there's a larger group of artists at Wayne State that are also very sustainably minded, and definitely connect with us and the team. It would be great to have you come to our future events or meetings and have your perspective, because it seems like you're somebody who would really want to kind of champion the work of sustainability, and we need people in every department at the university. So maybe we could even, I don't know what types of like material reuse programs are at the university, but I know that those things do exist in other places, and it would be cool to kind of just get your perspective and maybe start something along the lines of that.
Yeah, I'm very excited to get connected for that. And also like, I've noticed, I don't know what other universities are like. I did my undergrad at Wayne, and I'm getting my graduate degree there, but I did most of my college before I transferred to Wayne, and I did lots of different colleges, and they were all community colleges all over the country, because I was very nomadic. And so I don't really know what is normal, but it feels like there's a lot of separation in like areas of the school. And I was like, this is actually really not good for artists. Like, artists are better. Like, artists need to connect to their artists, and they need to connect to whatever fields fuel their art. So like for me, like treating the land well fuels my art. Like helping wildlife fuels my art. So it's like if I'm only focused on art in the art college, then I'm missing kind of all the soul feeding things that are really going on. So I've been trying to like inspire some of the undergrad students that I know to like get in, like if you're at all inclined to have your work speak up about the environment or social issues, find places on campus where you can connect to students who are doing that work, so that your artwork can really make a difference, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. You are definitely quite the ambassador. It's great to hear stuff like that, because I think there's a lot of people at Wayne State who are, some more than others, super passionate about the city and sustainability, but enabling them is something that, you know, I think our team, we've been working hard to kind of drive that student engagement, both with the students and with staff and faculty.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Michelle, for giving this fantastic presentation. I was saying earlier, I definitely am walking away learning a lot, especially from a perspective of bringing the environment to the urban setting. You know, not just acknowledging the built environment, but also the natural environment as well, and working to what we have here. And, you know, the heat aspects, the concrete aspects, all the different obstacles and hurdles that are in the way of green life in urban settings. So we really appreciate the work that you do, and the presentation that you've given. I've definitely learned a lot.
Thanks. And folks are willing to join us in any of these endeavors, just drop me a line. Happy to get you involved in any way that you'd like to be, and maybe try some new things too. I'm definitely interested in the art angle. I am not artistic at all, but I can appreciate art. So, and I would love to see it meld in with the work that we're making in some of the gardens with the plants.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Michelle. That was awesome.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Michelle.
So
You're
good.
welcome. Thanks for coming on a Friday afternoon. Nice to see you
Thank you,
folks.
guys.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Bye.